Now we're doing the webinars in addition to doing these in cities and groups within cities. I have been presenting book briefings, only I call them book synopses, at the First Friday Book Synopsis in Dallas. And I have been doing those since April of 1998. So I have presented over 650 books. And here's the premise. If you will listen to my presentation, follow along with pen in hand, mark up the handout, and then one time reread this handout in the next 3 to 5 days, it's not as good as reading the book for yourself, but in some ways it is nearly as good. It's a deep dive. You see many of the key quotes and highlighted passages from the book, and it will help you get it within your heart and soul and mind. And then it's your job to put what you learn into practice. And so I'm sorry I can't help you with that part of it. You'll have to do that. Now, I want to say a couple of things about these webinars. This is a great tool, and I hope you'll encourage other people to attend these SGR webinars. Once a month, I will present a book briefing. It's always the second Wednesday of the month on the book briefing. And next month, I am presenting the new Bible of customer service. It is a book called Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guadara, who was the manager, owner, guy who ran the show at the #1 restaurant in the world in 2017. Unreasonable Hospitality is a home run of a book, and I'll present that on the second Wednesday of September. And just to mark your calendar now, next week, the webinar for SGR is Michael Wilkes, a city manager from Olathe, Kansas, and the topic is how to lead in a way that promotes innovation. And boy, are we always in need of innovation. So that's kind of a couple of things to announce here at the beginning. For a lifelong learner, these webinars are gifts to us. And so I hope you'll take advantage of them. I listen in when I can, and this recording will be made available. You'll get it in an email, but I think that Lisa is also going to put a link, it already has, in the chat so that you can see the prior book briefings and all of the prior webinars that we've done. All right. An important introduction to this book. In 2007, I think, maybe 2004, the city manager of Fort Collins, Colorado, was a man named Darren Atterbury. And if you don't know that name, Darren Atterbury is the CEO of SGR, this company. He became CEO, I think, in around January of this year, as Ron Hollifield kind of stepped aside from that role. Darren Atterbury, in around 2010 or so, was on a podcast with Bob O'Neill, the executive director of ICMA, and this author, Jim Collins. And Darren Atterbury was a real fan of Jim Collins' books. And he said that they are really perfect for city government executive teams. And I think that they apply in any arena, and I'm a fan of Jim Collins also. And so Darren especially loved Good to Great, Built to Last, and this book, Great by Choice. And he implemented what Jim Collins taught and other things. And if you know what the Baldrige Award is, and that is for excellence and really rising to the top, well, Fort Collins was a recipient of the Baldrige Award. So just letting you know, he could not join us today, but Darren Atterbury, the SGR CEO, is a big fan of this book, as I am. Now, let me say a word or two about a couple of other books that Jim Collins has written. One of the things that Jim Collins does, he's very data driven, and he looks at companies and organizations and he says, what makes this company move from good to great? And he has some metrics to decide what is considered great. In this book, Great by Choice, he calls them 10Xers. I'll get to that in a moment. So he looks at companies that move from good to great. So I've got a couple of comments about what he discovered. First, what he did discover, if you put it into practice, will likely make your organization better. He talks about levels of leadership. He talks about the kind of leader that is humble but very aggressive in the reputation of and the success of the company. Humble for himself or herself, but very aggressive for what results in success in the organization. But one of the things that Jim Collins has been criticized for is in the book Good to Great, he had exemplar companies. And for example, he said Apple was not a great company. Microsoft was. Well, for most of the time until the last few months, Apple was way ahead of Microsoft in valuation. So he later admitted that he missed that a little bit, but he said, I was looking at it for the metrics in the period of time I looked at it. He also named as an exemplar company a company called Circuit City, which shortly after the book Good to Great came out, and Circuit City was an exemplar company, Circuit City went bankrupt. And so let me say this in Randy Mayu's voice. It's really hard to be a good company and organization. It's harder to move from good to great. And maybe once you attain great, it's really hard to stay great. So those are kind of some of the reminders of the reality of how difficult it is to run a successful organization and stay great. All right, that's a long introduction. Let's look at the handout, and I'd like you to follow along, keep your eyeballs on the page I'm on, and here we go. I'm on the front page. True discipline requires mental independence and an ability to remain consistent, circle that word consistent, in the face of herd instinct and social pressures. Fanatic discipline often means being a nonconformist. So those are words from the book. I'm going to read the rest of this first page. Great by accident, great by choice. Guess which is better? In reality, there is no true greatness by accident. You might have a success because of a technological breakthrough, but to build an organization that stays great is not an accident. Greatness comes over the long haul with clarity and faithfulness in decision making. It is the choices made especially by the leaders of an organization that lead toward greatness. And these decisions, these choices flow from values, and they require great discipline. Integrity is all about having and honoring the right values, making the right choices, getting really good at advanced decision making. What is advanced decision making? It is that when you are faced with a crisis, a challenge, you have made decisions in the past that set you up to do the best effective right thing in the middle of the crisis. You have decided in advance. Let me put it in a practical way. Have you ever had trouble withholding your eating desires on a buffet line? Well, advanced decision making means that you decide in advance what you're going to eat on the buffet line. So that's what that means. And I'm reading now, and staying on track. The temptation to go off track is everywhere present, all the time. But the leader with the right values staying on track leads an organization toward that path to greatness. As the book says, when the moment comes, when we're afraid, exhausted, or tempted, what choice do we make? Do we abandon our values? Do we give in? Do we accept average performance because that's what most everyone else accepts? Do we capitulate to the pressure of the moment? Do we give up on our dreams when we've been slammed by brutal facts? In the end, we can control only a tiny sliver of what happens to us. But even so, we are free to choose, free to become great by choice. By the way, one line from Darren Atterbury when he was the city manager of Fort Collins, he says, "It is so easy to be average, and it is so difficult to get above average thinking." He said that is a perpetual challenge. I really liked that. That it's easy to just accept what's there, but to rise above that, to go above average thinking, is the difference between the great ones and the ones that never make it to great. All right, turn to page 2. You'll notice that these are quotes directly from the book, the best of my highlighted passages from the book. And when you see one in bold or in a color font, that's my emphasis, saying pay a special attention to those. I'm going to read a bunch of those. We're going to go very fast. Here we go. Number 1, 10Xers utterly reject the idea that luck, chaos, or any external factor will determine whether they succeed or fail. What is a 10Xer? In this book, they are 10 times better. They have 10 times more effectiveness. In the business world with profit, they have 10 times more profit than the average company. So that's what he means by 10Xers. Look at number 6, the 20-mile march. Circle that phrase, the 20-mile march. Let me try to describe what he's doing with this. It's kind of the overarching metaphor of what the book is saying. If you want to be great by choice, then you've got to have a lot of 20-mile marches. So remember the title of the book, Great by Choice, Uncertainty, Chaos, and Luck, Why Some Thrive Despite Them All. So what is this 20-mile march? Well, the overarching metaphor is about Roald Amundsen, who was the first group. He led the trek to the South Pole. And it turns out that there was a competitor who was trying to get there at about the same time. That competitor with his team did not make it, whereas Amundsen made it. And he had decided in advance on that dangerous trek that he would drive his team to go 20 miles a day when the weather was horrific, when it was very difficult to keep going. They still strove to get to 20 miles. In a few minutes, I'll read you what they actually averaged. And when they had easy weather and they could go further than 20 miles with no problem, he made them stop at 20 miles, because if they had pushed themselves then, they would not have replenished the energy to go 20 miles when it was difficult. So you're going to see the 20-mile march throughout this handout and throughout this book. Number 6, The 20-mile march creates two types of self-imposed discomfort. Number one, the discomfort of unwavering commitment to high performance in difficult conditions. And number two, the discomfort of holding back in good conditions. It's hard to keep going when it's hard. It's hard to stop when it's easy. And he says you've got to deal with that discomfort both ways. Keep going when it's hard. Pause and rest when it's easy. Number 7, the evidence shows that 10X companies embraced a 20-mile march early, long before they were big companies. Every comparison company failed to 20-mile march with anything close to the consistency shown by the 10X cases. Now, number 8, a good 20-mile march uses performance markers. They figure out within their organization, what do we do that constitutes a 20-mile march? Let me tell you why I hate to present this book. I read and prepare 3 new book presentations minimum every month. And I read this book and I present this book and I say to myself, I need to set up a minimum number of pages to read every single day. And I tell myself to do that. And I don't do it. So when it comes down to the wire, I'm working like a dog to catch up. If I implemented what I hear and see in this book, I would be, my wife would be happier with me and things would be better. So I need to, this is the second time I presented this book this year so far. I need to implement that myself. By the way, I did present this at the planning retreat day for the city of Frisco recently. Their mayor, their city council, their city manager, and all of their executive department heads. So really an important and good book. All right, number 11, performance marker, check. Self-imposed constraint, check. Appropriate to the enterprise, check. Largely within its control, check. Goldilocks time frame, not too much, not too little, check. Designed and self-imposed by the enterprise, check. Achieved with high consistency, check. There's your meeting agenda discussion right there. Go through your own work and your own team's work. And how are you doing on self-imposed constraint appropriate to the enterprise and the others? Number 13, the 20-mile march order imposes order amidst disorder, consistency amidst swirling inconsistency. But it works only if you actually achieve your march year after year. If you set a 20-mile march and then fail to achieve it, or worse, abandon fanatic discipline altogether, you may well get crushed by events. Turn to page 3. Top of the page. Now put a star beside number 14. Confidence comes not from motivational speeches, charismatic inspiration, wild pep rallies, unfounded optimism, or a blind hope. Recently, the city of Prosper, Texas, asked me to prepare and present a synopsis. This is something their city manager wanted, on the great book, The Boys in the Boat. It was about the rowing team that won the 1936 Olympics. It's a book about discipline and teamwork. And it became a movie that was produced by George Clooney. Here's something that struck me in reading that book. The coach of the rowing team gave no pep rally motivational speeches. That's not what would turn the boys into Olympic champions. It was discipline and hard work. Now, I'm not against good speeches, but they don't produce lasting effect. One reason that I love doing book briefings is that it's a deeper dive into significant ideas. So I suppose I could work up a motivational speech. I think the books themselves are motivational, but I really like that. And by the way, there is research to back it up that motivational speeches do not have lasting impact. Number 15, the principals at the Arizona Beat the Odds schools. This is a story about schools in Arizona at the time he wrote it that were beating the odds, understood that grasping for the next silver bullet reform, lurching from one program to the next, this year's fad to next year's fad, destroys motivation and erodes confidence. You've probably all experienced a leader comes in with a new idea. He's going to implement or she's going to implement it throughout the organization. And about the time you learn how to do it, there's another new idea. Well, you need to make some decisions, come up with some disciplines to reach the goals of those decisions, and do that effectively. Number 20, Amundsen clocked in at the South Pole right on pace, having averaged 15.5 miles per day. He didn't hit the 20-mile march, but he hit it at 15.5. Having a clear 20-mile march focuses the mind because everyone on the team knows the markers and their importance. They can stay on track. Financial markets are out of your control. Customers are out of your control. Earthquakes and tornadoes and floods are out of your control. Global competition is out of your control. Technological change is out of your control. Most everything is ultimately out of your control. But when you 20-mile march, you have a tangible point of focus that keeps you and your team moving forward despite confusion, uncertainty, and even chaos. Number 23. This is a great quote. We live in a nation, in a modern culture, that reveres the next big thing. If you always search for the next big thing, that's largely what you'll end up doing, always searching for the next big thing. This book was written, let's see, the year it came out was in 2011. That's 14 years ago. That's well before our current version of artificial intelligence. I do want to step back and acknowledge the difficulty of dealing in this new AI environment. I read an article this week. I've presented somewhere around a dozen books dealing with AI. And there's some great ones, and these are big picture books. These are not how to use the latest Chat GPT. And so I read an article recently that says the advancement in AI is so rapid that people who learn how AI is working right now don't have time to implement it before it is obsolete. Now, that's a new challenge. And I don't know, I'd love to have a conversation with Jim Collins about how to handle that. But that's an aside that I was thinking of. All right, number 24. Put a star beside 24 on page 3. To 20-mile march requires hitting specific performance markers with great consistency over a long period of time. It requires two distinct types of discomfort: delivering high performance in difficult times and holding back in good times. Number 25, the 20-mile march builds confidence. Failing to 20-mile march leaves an organization more exposed to turbulent events. Let me think about it this way. You come up with something you need to work on. You've got to keep working on it. If somebody tries to get you off target, get back on target. You've got to keep that 20-mile march with something you've decided in advance. Page 4, number 27. 20-mile marchers have an edge in volatile environments. They had 20-mile marches in place long before they were big successes, which helped them to become successful in the first place. I'm currently reading a book called The Thinking Machine. It's about Jensen Huang, NVIDIA. He's the CEO of NVIDIA, and the rise of NVIDIA. If you're not aware, NVIDIA is currently the most valuable company on the planet. Jensen Huang was there when it was nothing. And he kept at it. And he kept his goals clear. He 20-mile marched over and over and over again. It's really one of the best longevity stories I've ever read. And that book, the book on NVIDIA and that company, kind of jumped out at me as I was revisiting Great by Choice. Number 28, this is a big idea in the book. You need to fire bullets, but not cannonballs. And we'll talk about that in a minute. A bullet is a low cost, low risk, and low distraction test or experiment. 10Xers use bullets to empirically validate what will actually work. Based on that empirical validation, they then concentrate their resources to fire a cannonball, enabling large returns from concentrated bets. Number 29, our 10X cases fired a significant number of bullets that never hit anything. They didn't know ahead of time which bullets would hit or be successful. Number 30, launching an uncalibrated cannonball means placing a big bet without empirical validation. If you shoot a cannonball, your big kahuna job, and you don't know if it'll work because you've shot little bullets first to see if it would work, you're going to end up wasting resources, lowering the morale of the people, destroying confidence. But if you fire a bullet and it works, and you fire another bullet and it works, and now you combine them into a cannonball, now you know when you put in the effort, it's going to produce results. That's the idea of the bullets and cannonballs. And look at number 32, once you know what works. Well, failure to fire cannonballs, once calibrated, leads to mediocre results. The idea is not to choose between bullets or cannonballs, but to fire bullets first, then the cannonballs. All right, now let's go to number 34. This one's interesting, and this one may be dated by the pace of technological change now. In 2011, nobody could imagine that the pace of technological change would get even faster. But if they'd been paying attention, they would have known it is definitely getting faster. Quick comment, for those of you who know Moore's law, the transistor will shrink in size to half every 12 to 18 months. It will double in capacity and shrink in price. Well, that was 12 to 18 months. And now with AI, Moore's law is now down to, I just read this, 3 months and 4 days. Holy mackerel. So anyway, so number 34, what he wrote in 2011. The 10X winners were not always more innovative than the comparison cases. We concluded that each environment has a threshold level of innovation, defined as a minimum level of innovation required even to be a contender in the game. For some industries, the innovation threshold is low, whereas for other industries, the threshold is very high. However, once above the innovation threshold, being more innovative doesn't seem to matter very much. This reminds you, for those of you who know this, of the diffusion of innovation bell curve. There are people who are the true innovators, but a bunch of innovations never catch on. And so the true innovators are the outsiders. But then the early adopters, if they adopt what does catch on, they are ahead of the game. But the innovator may have an innovation that never catches on. So, and sometimes early adopters buy into the wrong innovation. So I guess what I'm saying is do your research. Choosing the right innovation is not as easy as it sounds. Okay, number 39. They understood deeply. The only mistakes you can learn from are the ones you survive. If you ever hit the death line where you die, this is from the march to the South Pole and the other team died, you end the journey. Game over. So they prepare obsessively, ahead of time, all the time, for what they cannot possibly predict. They assume that a series of bad events can wallop them in quick succession, unexpectedly, and at any time. It's what you do before the storm hits. The decisions and disciplines and buffers and shock absorbers already in place that matter most in determining whether your enterprise pulls ahead, falls behind, or dies when the storm hits. You read these words and you think of the flooding in Kerr County, Texas, that took so many lives, and the flooding we're seeing from Harlingen, Texas to Milwaukee. Boy, does the United States need cities and counties and states to do a better job getting ready for the next flood. My goodness. All right, turn to page 5. Number 44 is about Southwest Airlines. Howard Putnam, in their early days, didn't issue some bland generic, Southwest Airlines will be a leading low-cost airline. He specified 2-hour segments. He specified 737s. Every pilot could fly every plane. He specified 10-minute turns. He specified no air freight, no mail. He specified no food service. He specified no interlining. He specified no seat selection. He specified cash register receipts. Putnam's 10 points are easy to grasp, articulate, follow, and understand what to do and what not to do. He laid out a clear, simple, and concrete framework for decisions and actions, and Putnam's 10 points reflect insight based upon empirical validation about what works. And for years, Southwest really flourished with that formula. Now, times are different today. All right, number 50. We sense a dangerous disease infecting our modern culture and eroding hope. An increasingly prevalent view that greatness owes more to circumstance, even luck, than to action and discipline. Put a star beside this. That what happens to us matters more than what we do. We want to build a society and culture that encourages us to believe that we aren't responsible for our choices and accountable for our performance. And so one of the things that I would say is, of course, there is luck. He includes a metric called return on luck. And that's a great metric. But, you know, Michael Jordan did work harder than other basketball players. Tom Brady did work harder than other football players. There are Jensen Huang of NVIDIA. I'm reading this book. Oh my goodness, did he work harder? And so, did he get lucky? Yes. Did his chip arrive at the right time in the right way? Yes. But his discipline created that moment. All right, number 51. If one company becomes great, while another in similar circumstances and with comparable luck does not, the root cause of why one becomes great and the other does not simply cannot be circumstance or luck. That's why Jim Collins has spent his life studying companies that made it, contrasted with companies that didn't. All right, number 53, greatness is not primarily a matter of circumstance. Greatness is first and foremost a matter of conscious choice and discipline. When the moment comes, number 54, when we're afraid, exhausted, or tempted, what choice do we make? And number 55, in the end, we can control only a tiny sliver of what happens to us. But even so, we are free to choose, free to become great by choice. Those are the best highlighted passages of this book. Let me give you a little tip. I now speak often enough to executive teams presenting these book presentations. One of the things they do is they will photocopy or copy and paste the 10 best highlighted passages for their circumstance. They'll, at a meeting, hand them out, everybody read them, circle the one that matters, and discuss it. It's a great informing conversation starter. Turn to page 6. On the right, it is the, by the way, we're going to end at 11:45, so we've got 6 more minutes. It is the decisions, the choices made by companies, led by leaders who are crystal clear about what they intend, that set some companies above the others. Companies are not great by accident. They are great by choice, by the choices they make. Here's a short great by choice glossary on the left of page 6. 10Xers. They beat their industry over the long haul by at least 10 times. 20-mile march. A set, pre-decided, advance on schedule. Learn from the daily goal of Roald Amundsen's team, which trekked a set, predetermined distance every day on their way to the South Pole. Now, if you've got a pen, there's a little bit of white space here. Write down 2 other acronyms, BHAG and SMART. And now he's got SMAC. These are acronyms for goal setting and goal understanding. SMAC is his new one: specific, methodical, and consistent. Specific goals, methodical goals, and consistent goals. You probably know the acronyms BHAG and SMART. BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal. That's a big one. And SMART is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And the research is kind of growing that SMART goals are too, this is my word, too puny. You need BHAG goals. But now, paying attention here, you need BHAG connected with SMAC. So that's worth thinking about. Bullets and cannonballs, bullets and empirical tests aimed at learning what works. It meets 3 criteria: low cost, low risk, low distraction. Cannonballs, big cost, big risk, big focus and energy, and you want it to be calibrated by bullets so you'll know your cannonball will likely work. The death line, the end, with no coming back. You don't want this. I don't know how old you are on this webinar. I'm an old guy, but this is news yesterday. The painfully inadequate, tiny remnant of a great company at one time called Kodak yesterday apparently finally went fully bankrupt. That's the death line. And then luck. There's a good luck, there's bad luck, and it is in the response to bad luck that the tale is told. So you need return on luck. All right, turn to page 7 very quickly. The major lessons. 10Xers exemplify fanatic discipline. 10Xers exemplify empirical creativity, bullets that you can measure. And 10Xers exemplify productive paranoia. The leader of Intel decades ago wrote a book called Only the Paranoid Survive, Productive Paranoia. All right, about 20-mile marches, let's drop down to a good 20-mile march has the following 7 characteristics: clear performance markers, self-imposed constraints, appropriate to the specific enterprise, largely within the company's ability to achieve, control to achieve, a proper time frame imposed by the company upon itself, achieved with high consistency. How do you design your 20-mile march? Well, I hate to do this. You have to read the rest of the handout on your own. Turn to page 9, and here are 5 lessons and takeaways. Number 1, cultivate productive paranoia. Assume that the worst can happen in this VUCA world of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Number 2, set your 20-mile march regimen and routine. Number 3, store up plenty of cash so you'll have it when you need it. Number 4, be creative enough, innovative enough. And though this is not said in the book, it's obvious, Jim Collins reads widely. Not just a lot, but widely. I mean, he got his big metaphor from a South Pole expedition. So that's it. Great by choice. Uncertainty, chaos, and luck. Why some thrive despite them all. It's 11:45. I think I made it. Let me invite you again to be back next month on the second Wednesday for Unreasonable Hospitality. I'm handing it back to Lisa Shook. Lisa, thank you.
Thank you, Randy. That was wonderful. We appreciate everyone joining us. We will send out the link to the webinar in an email to everyone. And we hope you'll join us again next week for our Wednesday webinar, again at 11 o'clock. Everybody have a great day.